So let's start with legendary engineer Pappy Middleton. He was absolutely instrumental in your career. No pun intended, right?
Yes, he
Um,
was.
so what was his role? Because I understand at this time in your life, you kind of want to get away from what you're doing because of the struggles and things like that. You feel like you've done your time. You do have this passion for music, but perhaps at the time you don't really think that that's even possible full time. But Pappy changed this for you. So tell us what that was like.
He did. So I went out to Pappy's in Palmer, Texas, and I went there to mix my first album, Junkyard Angel. And it was just like I wrote that album just to see if I could write.
Mm-hmm.
Like I felt like I was gonna be a pretty good songwriter and I knew I had to start somewhere. And I had all these stories to tell. So I had recorded the album in Birmingham, but my producer um, was knew Pappy and he had worked with him before. And so we went out there to mix it. And we were there for like a week. And I got to know Pappy so well and grew to love him so much. And we were sitting in the foyer of his gorgeous studio. It's just an awesome ranch in Palmer, Texas. And he said, "So, are you gigging?" And I was like, "Well, yeah. I mean, I play shows around Birmingham." And he was like, "No, no, no. Like, are you? What are you going to do with this?" And I said, "Well, I don't know." Um, and he said, "Well, are you working right now?" And I was like, "No, I'm in between jobs. I just got laid off." And he was like, "I don't think that you should go back to your day job anytime soon. This is good." He said, "You're good. And I think that you're going to be great. And, before you get to an age where you're going to look back and regret it, I think that you should give it a go." And I've never looked back.
And so we talked about imposter syndrome. I have to interject that here because I imagine you're working through your first album kind of as an experiment probably in your mind,
Mhm.
and you're probably the whole time still dealing with that imposter syndrome. Just because your passion has changed doesn't mean your mental illness has. So you're
Right.
probably still talking yourself out of it. No, you're not good enough. No, blah blah blah. But then Bonnie Raitt's producer tells you it's time to put everything else aside. Um, that's some pretty big validation.
Yeah, it was. I was not expecting that,
Yeah.
and it meant so much to me because a couple of years before that, my grandfather had told me the same thing before he passed away, and it was really important to him for me to do something, quote, do something with my music. And that's another thing that kind of led me to doing the first album in the first place. And so to have my granddaddy, who was such a great musician and so picky about music, to give me that advice, and then for Pappy to come in later and battle and second that, it felt like it felt like I was being called
Hmm. That's
to
a
go.
that's a full cup at that point, right? Your cup is full. Um,
Yeah.
so a lot of years later, we're not going to skip over them at all, but I do want you to try your very best to describe your sound, your vibe, your style, your genre. Can you do it? How? Who? Like? I can't. I've been listening to music. I've interviewed a lot of people. I can't describe your sound.
Well, my guitarist made a joke one time, and it's kind of stuck. We call it gothy tonk.
Did you say gothy tonk?
Yeah.
Let's go. I love that. Okay.
Because it's like this mixture, it's like this balance between this kind of dark subject matter and all this minor key stuff that I love to do. And then but I also love, a honky tonk toe tapper. Like it's kind of like, it kind of dawned on me the other day that, like, it's a little bit like Johnny Cash, like Johnny Cash has got some really lighthearted toe tapping barn burners, and then he's got some really heavy dark stuff. And I would say that if you can deal with that balance, then
Mhm.
you like my music.
Well, you are unbelievably unique. I mean, it's just there's nobody like you. I just there's nobody like you. So, from the standpoint of touring, getting booked, things like that, does that hold you back with venues? Like just trying to describe to a venue, this is who I am, this is what you can expect. Like, is there a
It
struggle
might.
there?
I mean, it might. I've noticed that. I mean, I think booking has gotten harder post pandemic just for
Absolutely.
everybody.
Right.
And we've got some. We're really fortunate to have some awesome tour dates coming up in the fall, and I'm really excited about it. But I don't know. I've never thought about that. I know that booking's hard in general, but it probably does make it a little bit more challenging for my agent to say, try to categorize me
Mm.
because you kind of can't.
Yeah, because you have to have a listener base, and if your listener base is as unique as yours is,
Mhm.
how do you cut that down geographically to a just a small area? Well, I'm country, but I'm also Black Sabbath. I'm also Amy Winehouse. I'm also, but if your venue only wants a country audience, then that might be a struggle. So when I hear somebody who's so dang unique in your touring as well, I'm always interested about that. Now you are obviously an indie artist as well, very DIY. And so a question I always like to ask indie artists is, now early on in your music, probably about the time you're experimenting with that first album, what was your education like in music and getting acclimated in the way things work? Like, for example, with songwriting and the studio side of things, the marketing side of things. Like, I imagine this was all very new to you coming from law to music, and that can be a slow process. So, what was that like for you?
Had no idea what I was doing at all. Like in the beginning, I had been playing in a bluegrass cover band with a bunch of guys, and one of them, William Barnes, he was the only one that wasn't like a lawyer, an accountant, or something. And he was like a professional musician. And I just went to William and said, I've got like 10 or 11 songs that I'd like to make into an album. Can you help me? And I just kind of followed William's lead for a year or two. And he's the one that taught me how to do a press release and how to put a press kit together.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a long time ago when the press kit was like a notebook that you mailed out
Yep.
to journalists with like clippings, of newspaper. And I mean, he explained the basics of the music business to me, and the rest of it I've just figured out on my own. And from time to time I've gotten up the courage to ask people more important than myself, the questions of like, what's the timeline for an album release or stuff like that. I've just kind of gathered it up on my own.
I feel like in this business, anytime you have a conversation with anybody that's also in the business, you should try to take something from that conversation. You should
Yeah.
always try to learn something, and even folks like Pappy Middleton, right? I mean, there's always something to learn from every single situation, every single person's perspective, essentially. And as an indie artist, I feel like that's even doubly true, because you don't have anybody to do it for you, right? So if you don't do it, who will?
Yeah, yeah.
You
I
know?
mean, I've been fortunate in the last few years to have some help. I had my first manager for a few years, and now I'm working with 14-inch Fringe and Shalimaro, and she's been a wealth of information. I have learned so much from her in the past year. And My friends at Mule Kick Records, that's the little label that I'm on. They're a little label with a big impact,
Mm-hmm.
and they've helped me a lot too. They've guided me through this whole process.
Yeah, and you have to have those people in your corner, even if you are indie. I feel like again, it all goes back to validation, right? Because we're always going to beat ourselves up internally.
Yeah.
Um, so the thing for me as a consumer and a listener that separates mainstream artists from indie artists such as yourself is essentially subject matter. and the content within the lyrics of the actual songs themselves. So, as an indie artist yourself, tell us what that creative freedom does for you. I mean, I don't think you've ever been signed to a major label, but I imagine that um, hindrance to your creativity would be a huge detriment to you. So, do you lean on that creative freedom a lot within your subject matter?
Oh yeah. I mean, that's the thing that I love about being an indie artist. I mean, I wouldn't kick a good label deal out of bed,
Of course.
but for now, like I mean, Mule Kick is helping me put this album out, but they've been totally hands off, and on purpose on the creative process, and because they know me and they appreciate my creativity for everything that it is. And so like for me, like the whole process, it's not just the writing of the songs and the recording of the songs and the performing of the songs. It's also all the visuals, all the videos.
Hmm.
I come up with all the concepts for the videos. I co-direct them. I do set design. I do the costumes. I do the casting. And I love doing it. Like I was an MTV kid, so I love making music videos. And I love making, content for TikTok and Instagram. And it's really, that's the fun part, is just making it all come together,
Hmm.
and the whole comprehensive concept of the whole album.
Well, one thing that can be an absolute 180 from that creative process and that creative freedom is marketability. And earlier in the show, you described one of the words you used to describe your own music was dark. Now,
Mhm.
dark is very difficult to sell within the music industry. So,
Yeah.
what's the struggle there for you?
I mean, I've got to be me.
Absolutely.
I've spent, incidentally, I am a late diagnosed high masking autistic person, and I've
Okay.
spent most of my life trying to be anything but who I am. And so now, where I am in this process and in this point in my life, I've got to be me. And there's a dark side to my storytelling and my music. Um, but there's always been room for dark in music. I mean, like I said, like Johnny Cash. I mean, he's done some dark stuff. And Nico Case, her stuff, like I mean, she was one of my biggest inspirations to quit my job and do this for a living. And a lot of her stuff is dark. And so I feel like that there is a listener out there that's going to embrace it.
There is, absolutely. And just hearing you say that is very refreshing to a listener because I feel like a lot of people. I'll give you an example. One of the most famous songs ever recorded was He Stopped Loving Her Today by George Jones. It's
Yeah,
been rated the number one country song ever. And George Jones himself did not want to record that song because it was too dark.
yeah.
Imagine. Imagine a world without He Stopped Loving Her Today. Can you imagine that? Like,
No, no.
just,
I mean, that's one of the greatest songs ever written,
right.
and it's so beloved. And I don't think anybody wakes up in the morning and thinks, God, I'd really like to listen to some dark shit today.
Right.
But
But we need it.
when it falls on your ears, I feel like some of those minor key songs, they draw you in. They're
Absolutely.
intriguing,
Absolutely.
and then before you know it, you're paying attention to the story, and you've got the full visual in your mind's eye, and it's a deeper experience.
Absolutely. And I just love interviewing folks that are creative. Thank you for being here.